In the summer of 1991, while taking a hike past the scenic Multnomah Falls in Oregon, inspiration struck a young Richard Garfield. By combining influence from two of his favorite games, Dungeons & Dragons and Cosmic Encounter, Richard created a new kind of game, a trading card game like no other before and since. Magic the Gathering launched in the summer of 1993, and the rest is history. And although he left Wizards of the Coast in 2000, Richard Garfield has continued to actively create great games. Aside from Magic the Gathering, Keyforge, Netrunner, Battletech, Vampire: The Eternal Struggle, King of Tokyo, and so many more, his latest work, Vanguard Exiles, is igniting the passion of gamers everywhere. And so it's with my great pleasure that I get to sit down here and speak today with Dr. Richard Garfield, creator of Magic the Gathering. May I call you Richard? And thank you so much for being here today.
Yes, please do call me Richard. It's a pleasure to be here.
I mean, there would be a certain poetry in that my nickname is the professor. So if I just spoke to you as the doctor throughout the entire interview, though that might confuse some Doctor Who fans. But wow, what an absolute honor. My goal for today is to try and ask you questions that you haven't been asked before, which, considering the length of your career, might be next to impossible, but I'm really going to give it a try.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'll probably be able to tell when you hit with one of them because there'll be an abnormal pause.
Awesome. I'll be looking forward to it. So your new game, Vanguard Exile, has just come out, or will have by the time that this video airs. But I have to ask you, out of all the games that you have created over your career, do you have a favorite? I know you're not supposed to pick favorites, but do you have a favorite game?
Anytime I'm asked that, I cannot do anything but answer Magic as the favorite. It's proven to be so flexible and opened so many doors for me and captured so much of my design sensibility. Even though it is, by some measures, my oldest game, it remains my favorite. In the years since Magic, probably Keyforge is my favorite paper game after that. Keyforge was in some ways revisiting Magic with the eye towards trying to capture something that I felt had fallen by the wayside with Magic, where the default in Magic became get all the cards, make the best deck, whereas when it started out, the access to cards to the players was very limited. And so with Keyforge, I made it so that the deck was the unit, and that was really exciting to explore.
We absolutely love Keyforge here too. We did a few videos on it. What is your favorite way to play Magic the Gathering? Because there are so many ways to play this game, and even more added every day. But for you personally, what's your favorite way to play Magic?
You know, that's one of the things which really keeps Magic at the top of my list, is that it is so flexible and there's so many ways. In the first years it was out, it was like coming up with new ways to play every week. My favorite way is a wacky draft. That is, whatever draft I haven't played before, I love sitting down and trying it. If I had to pick one, I'd go with the backdraft, where you're drafting cards which you will give to your opponent. So when you're doing the draft, you're trying to get the worst deck possible, and then you're given whatever pile of garbage they drafted, and you're trying to assemble it into something that works. And I like it a lot because it really upset people's expectations and had a lot of different ways to approach it. And also it hit something which I really like in these sort of games, which is not necessarily choosing what tools you want, but making the most of what tools you have.
That's an amazing way to look at it. And I love that you like trying to make the biggest pile of garbage for your opponent. One of the things we love doing with Commander, which I've got a few questions for you in a bit, is just trying to build the jankiest, worst decks and play them against each other. And that actually results in some of the most fun for us.
I think there's something special about that approach, because Magic is this combination of making a deck and playing the deck, and it's really easy for the making the deck part to dominate that system. And so when you try to make the jankiest deck in a Commanders format, what you end up with is something where it's about the play rather than the make.
In terms of Commander, I think it's really interesting that it did not exist back when you created Magic the Gathering, obviously. How much multiplayer appeal did you think Magic the Gathering could have back in those early days?
My memory of it is probably a little unreliable, but I think the possibilities of multiplayer became apparent really early. I think at the beginning it was mostly team play because I had a very standoffish relationship with this picking on a particular player. And so with team play, you don't have to worry about that. You pick on your opponent, which is why two-player games are so great. And it's not that I didn't like multiplayer games or even multiplayer games where you pick on other players, but I was beginning to explore different ways to think about it. I remember that early on, we experimented with attacking to the left, which I'm sure is a variant you're familiar with.
Oh, yes.
That was one way to control that. You have probably heard that way back in the day that we actually took that to the extreme and put together something called the Grand Melee, which we had over 50, once over 100 players playing at the same time.
Wow.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
I don't even. But we had a lot of fun doing it, but it exhausted us. The key thing there was, of course, you can't wait for the turn to come around to you. So what you did was we had judges standing behind every fifth person, and every fifth person was taking their move. When all those people were done, the judges would step to the left, and everybody else, and then you'd advance in that way. And so that way, this group of 50, 60, 100 people would collapse. And it wouldn't take forever, though it would take a long time.
That sounds wild, absolutely wild. What do you make of the fact that Commander was actually a player-created format? It didn't come from the official folks at Wizards of the Coast. It was just developed by people who play Magic the Gathering and is now the most popular way to play Magic in terms of formats.
Well, it's something I love. Players in all game communities should, where possible, take control of their play experience. And it's something I've encouraged for Magic players forever. Back in the beginning, we made, for example, cards which we knew wouldn't be appealing to everybody, like Chaos Orb or the anti-cards. And my expectation was that players would take ownership of their own play experience and decide for themselves whether they wanted that in their group or not. And that's the same with formats. And the company, Wizards, did an excellent job at making Magic a seriously played game and making people think about it in a really analytic way. But there was always that thought, the fear that approach would take away from other formats of play. Our argument for embracing it was that basketball, for example, is not, people play it casually even though there's the NBA. And so that was what we looked for with the serious formats that were supported. Seeing the players take ownership and really advance the play in the area they want is a marvelous thing. So I think it's terrific. I think that the fact that Wizards eventually sat up and took ownership of that or took that direction was also marvelous. That was reflected well on them.
Do you have a Commander deck of your own? And if so, who's your Commander?
I did have a Commander deck of my own, but I have not played in a while, and I am afraid I do not remember what my Commander was.
Oh my goodness. Oh, everyone is going to be dying to know who was Richard Garfield's Commander.
The one I remember, I had a Goblin. Is there a Goblin Commander?
There are many.
A Goblin that's used as a commander? Okay, well, if there's many, then I probably can't pick out which one, but it was a while ago, so it would have been one of the ones a long time ago.
Might it have been Krenko, the mob boss? Or another variation of Krenko?
That does not sound familiar.
Okay, that would have been my best guess. Goblins are one of the most popular creature types out there, so there are definitely a lot of legendaries.
I'll tell you, It probably predated Kranko, because if Kranko were around, I would have played that. That's a marvelous name.
Perhaps War. Okay, I'm not going to go through all the goblins with you. As much as I would love this entire interview to be talking goblins with Richard Garfield, can I go back a little bit to Magic's beginning and just ask you? I want to ask about the reserve list in just a moment, but before we get to that, when we're looking at Alpha, if you could add or remove one card from Alpha, is there any changes that you might make there? Like if you could take one card that came after Alpha that you wish had been in the original set, or if you could take one card out of Alpha and be like, oh, I wish that card wasn't in there?
Removing cards is an easier question. A lot of people expect me to remove cards which are unbalanced by the sensibilities of modern players, but that's not the case. I would not remove, for instance, Ancestral Recall or the Moxes or anything like that. I would remove cards where you had to go into 6-point type to explain what was going on. So the Raging Rivers. And sort of Phantasmal Mask or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, those ones, anything which had small type, I would have gotten rid of. It's not actually that I mind the small type so much, it's just that I know that in Magic, the small type that we had at the beginning didn't pay for itself. Like those weren't cards you saw a lot of play, so why the heck am I reading through all this and trying to figure out how it works? So I'd remove those. And the ones I would add in would be, there are certain elegant effects which came later, which I would have been happy to have in the original. One of my favorite early cards was a counter spell where you countered it and put it on top of the opponent's deck. And so it wasn't as good as a counter spell in that a counter spell gets rid of the card, but it was very elegant and had some really interesting things with regard to tempo. So I love that because it was super simple and it changed up the way things were played. And another one I liked a lot was one that I came up with later, which was the Goblin Sharpshooter, which was originally written as the Gatling Gunner, but they didn't want guns in the game, where you tap it and do some damage, and if you destroyed the creature, you untapped it. That I would have been happy with in the original also, because I think it began to explore more thoroughly the playful nature that you could get in Magic, which was something we were just beginning to scratch at the beginning.
It's funny you should mention those cards with the tiny type, because one of the topics that a lot of people talk about in contemporary Magic is cards getting more and more complex and more wordy. And I'm curious if you feel there is any sort of danger in over-constructing or otherwise just making an overly complex Magic card, or if, as long as it's easy to grok, as they say, it's able to expand play design and play options.
Oh, I think it works. It's a little both. There was a pattern that we noticed at the beginning, and I don't know whether it's still in play, but where things would get more and more complicated, and then there would be a tightening of the belt and returning to basics. And the set that would come out would be much simpler. And there was some resistance to that from the players because it looked like sort of, oh, Magic for babies or something like that. But there was a much larger collective sigh from everybody where it's like, this is what I remember. So I think it's really easy to walk too far in that direction, but a mix is good, right? Like I think what my ideal is that the environment have common cards and uncommon cards, which are simple and straightforward and understandable, and that they're powerful enough to really be a part of all levels of play. And that there's rare cards which explore the smaller print area, the more complicated, the more nuanced. That's my ideal, because then you get some of both, and people can construct leaning on the rare cards and get that environment if that's what they want. But when you just look at a particular random deck from a random player, it isn't impenetrable.
I gotta ask about the reserve list. What is your opinion of the reserve list, and do you think it should even still exist today?
What is the reserve list?
Oh, goodness. So, you mentioned a moment ago the cards like the Moxen and Ancestral Recall. Well, a list of cards, including those very cards, was made way back, I believe still in the 90s. And it was a promise from Wizards of the Coast that these cards would never be reprinted and that the spirit of these cards would never be reprinted. The dual lands are on there, and they have honored that promise to today, but it means that cards like the Moxes and many, it's a very large list of these cards, are all astronomical in price and essentially unavailable to players today. And there's a lot of feeling that the reserve list should go away to allow people to be able to play with those cards, whereas other people feel Wizards made a promise to never reprint these cards, and they should honor that promise, even though the cards are astronomical in price, and a reprint might allow a whole new generation of players to enjoy it. It's still 30 years later. I guess the reserve list wasn't exactly 30 years ago, but many decades later, it is still a very hot topic in the Magic community, and so I was curious your thoughts on it.
I have no opinion as to whether Wizards should keep the reserve list or not, because I think when you make a promise, I think you should try to abide by it. But I think that was a bad promise to make. So my answer is conflicted. My sympathies are always with the players, and I want people to be able to play with the cards and effects they want to play with and make the best environment. I would not sacrifice any gameplay for a collector, for a speculator. I am happy to have collectors and speculators associated with any game I make, but not in a way that actually makes it so that whatever experience is produced is not the best one for the players. And so I think it was a bad promise, because I think it's clear that that restricts you from giving the best possible experience to the players. You know, what would be the best possible experience? I doubt it's keeping those cards in play all the time or anything like that. But they are important tools you have to give that experience that is best.
You've famously once said that the base version of a Magic card should never really cost over about $20, except for like special versions, foils, special printings, that's fine, but that the actual base game piece, the lowest cost version of a card, should always be kept affordable. And I'm curious if you still, that's an old interview clip of you that gets thrown around a lot. I may have shown it a few times on my channel, and I'm curious if you still agree with that, and if so, what your thoughts are on keeping the individual cards of Magic affordable.
I do still keep with that. I mean, $20 may not be the right number, but in that ballpark. The idea there is that you take the rare card and you see how much it would cost to be able to buy it with a rare card, and you make those rarities such that getting one doesn't break the bank. I'm not a big fan of getting ultra rares or epics or whatever those are, because those just drive the prices up. I don't mind cards exceeding that, but not from the currently playable environment, because once again, in my opinion, that decreases the quality of the experience you're giving to the players in deference to collectors. And I don't believe in deferring the play to the collectors at all. Now, as far as special art, you know, old treatments of cards, something like that, those can be as expensive as you like. The way I usually view it is, I think the game is healthiest when it's collectible in the same way stamps are. You don't go to buy a stamp and expect it to be worth a lot immediately. But if you're into it and you want to collect stamps, in time they may be worth something.
I'd love to turn a little bit to Magic's present and ask you about Universes Beyond, which is, are you familiar with Universes Beyond?
I am not up to date. I've picked up some tidbits here and there, but let me take a guess. Is Universes Beyond this idea of taking different properties and putting those cards into Magic?
So yes, so that's what I'd love to just ask about is, what do you think of Universes Beyond, where now there's cards like Ghostbusters cards and Jurassic Park cards and The Walking Dead cards and Transformers cards throughout now all the formats? It's not confined to a certain area. I'm curious what you think of that.
I'm not sure what to think of that. There's something which feels wrong about it to me, but on the other hand, it's the sort of thing which I would certainly do as a designer. I like to make cards that didn't fit inside the Magic world proper, And so I usually like to try to share what I like as a designer with the players. What do you think of it?
Well, everybody who watches my channel regularly just laughed. I'm very much of the belief that I love Magic's IP, I love Magic's worlds, I love Magic's story, and I like the immersion that I've always experienced. I started playing Magic back in 1995 or whatever when I was in high school, and when I took a brief hiatus from the game, it stayed with me. Not so much the mechanics of the cards, but the world that those cards represented, the worlds of the multiverse. And so I would have liked to keep Magic its own thing.
So you think it dilutes it or undermines it or destroys it?
I don't think it destroys it. I absolutely do not. I never want to yuck anyone's yum, even though I personally am a cranky old man who wants his Magic like it used to be. But I don't think it destroys it, but I do think it breaks the immersion of the world of Magic that right now, and this is not an exaggeration, I sit down to play Magic and there is a SpongeBob SquarePants card that can equip the sonic screwdriver from Doctor Who and go up against Captain America and fight alongside Slimer from the Ghostbusters. There's about 20 other properties that have already come in, and it's going to keep coming in. And it feels like the fact that this is in standard format, obviously Commander, everything, even Legacy, the Magic world has been definitely diluted and my immersion shattered, is my feeling.
I'm not sure. Certainly I don't like the sound of that. And when I go to a game store, there are some really good licensed games, but if I'm directed to it as an excellent game, then I will do it despite the properties. I don't find them a big pull. You know, one of the reasons why I've got some hesitation for condemning it, which seems like such a harsh way to put it. But back in the day, my first expansion was Arabian Knights, and there is this question as to whether Arabian Nights should have been part of the Magic world proper. I think it's part of the world proper, but it was a little bit of work to put in, and it's not exactly clear how it fits or why it would be there. But I liked Arabian Nights as an experience. Maybe it was because it was closer to the world of Magic than these other properties that it doesn't seem so jarring. But I didn't mind exploring other mythologies and literatures and so forth, and making a coherent experience with those. And I wouldn't have minded if Magic had dedicated themselves to that approach.
It's definitely one of the big hot topics of today, and I think that I don't want to dwell on it. I was just very curious your opinion, but it definitely is a toothpaste is out of the tube situation, because there's already been so much of it that it's a part of just about every aspect, every way that you play Magic the Gathering now, because they've integrated into the very standard format, and so it's all just trickled into everything else. And by trickle, I mean gushed. So there's quite a lot of it, and people love it. It's also, they are the best-selling sets now, are the ones where we bring in Lord of the Rings, which they did, and right now they're bringing in Final Fantasy, and everyone's very excited to buy Final Fantasy. And it just makes me feel sad that they're not excited to buy Dominaria or Ravnica or Innistrad quite as much, and that none of our characters or properties are ever going into any of their games either. But that, I don't want to dwell too much on that, or that we might talk about that the entire time.
It did surprise me. It surprised me a lot. I've got mixed feelings about it.
It surprised a lot of us. My channel is the Tolarian Community College, and I would be remiss if I didn't open up a few of these questions to members of our larger Magic the Gathering community. So if I could read a few questions that other creators in this space had for you, I would love to be able to ask on their behalf.
Sure.
Josh Lee Kwai asks, what do you consider to be the most perfectly designed Magic card of all time, and why?
I think I'll answer with one which is obviously not the most perfectly designed Magic card of all time, but it is nonetheless my favorite. which is Scheherazade, which goes back to the Arabian Knights. The way Scheherazade works, when you play it, you immediately start a sub-game of Magic. The loser of the sub-game loses half their life in the overgame. The reason I like it is because it's relatively simple. It's very meta. It reflects the idea of Scheherazade in this interesting way, which is Scheherazade is famous for telling stories within stories so that her overarching story of the Arabian Nights doesn't end. With this card, you're playing games within games. What pushed it over to being my favorite card of all time was the fact that there was this amazingly cool deck you could play with it, which was, when it was created, there weren't any deck restrictions, so you could play with all Scheherazades if you liked, and if you played with all Scheherazades and either Plains or Mox Pearls, and your deck was a little bigger than your opponent, you would win because you would play out a Scheherazade, start a sub-game, play out a Scheherazade, play a sub-game, play out a Scheherazade, play a sub-game, and eventually you would deck your opponent because you were saying you've got a deck which is a little bigger. So then you would win that sub game, and then they would lose half their life in that sub game, and then you would do it again. And so then anyway, when you work it all out, it takes like 40,000 sub games in order to win the top level game. And of course, with my mathematical bent, I love that.
That's really interesting that you should mention that, because our next question from Jesse Robkin actually refers to Scheherazade. When Magic was young, there were a lot of cards with extremely non-traditional mechanics that involve doing things that aren't baked into the rules. Cards like Scheherazade, Chaos Orb, Goblin Game, but these days, those kind of card designs are relegated to unsets. However, when you were designing Magic, they were present alongside all the classic and timeless cards like Sarah Angel, Counterspell, Lightning Bolt. So do you feel like something is lost when these kinds of designs are no longer possible in a game that's gone more mainstream? Or do you feel like you got what you wanted out of them? What do these sorts of cards mean to you? I suppose you just literally listed one as your favorite card ever, or one of them anyway, but what do these sort of cards mean to you as a game designer?
They mean a lot to me. Did I get enough out of them? Do I think the game's got enough out of them? I think that there is a balancing act there. When you get a huge community together, there are going to be some costs to that. But players, again, taking control of their own play environment does address some of that. And that's what I assumed at the beginning. Making games like cards like Scheherazade, you can't play a card like Scheherazade in a tournament. It just doesn't make sense. Chaos Orb is the same thing. But that doesn't mean that players aren't going to enjoy playing around with them. So this idea that when the game is young, you can do that stuff. When the game is mature, I think Wizards has found balance, at least it did 10 years ago, last when I checked, this balance of putting them in the unsets where you still could get them out there and play with your friends, these wacky effects that were not part of a traditional game. So that's a good approach. So yeah, I do miss them. I like to put them in my games when possible.
Kyle Hill asks, you are famously not Richard Garfield, but Richard Garfield PhD. What, if any, science made its way into the development of Magic from your mathematics background?
There's a number of ways you can go with that. First of all, the PhD was something that I wanted them to remove from the game. And it was kind of a running joke that they put it on it. And it took them a while to get the PhD out. And the reason why I didn't want the PhD there is because the standard, as I understood it, was like a medical doctor can always be a doctor, but a doctor of mathematics should only use doctor when they're doing something which is principally mathematics. Yeah, it seemed out of place. And in fact, Feldigriff was a riff on that, as I'm sure many of your watchers know, is an anagram of Garfield PhD. And they were making fun of the fact that I had PhD on those first products. So what mathematics did I use? Nothing in particular. My interest in mathematics and love of mathematics, I think, is very related to my love of games. I love thinking about these systems and figuring out their behavior. And that's a similar sort of thinking that goes on in both designing and playing games and in mathematics. So I think the things which drew me to games also drew me to math. And people have asked whether you need math to make a good game. And my answer, of course, is no. You do need math, but I like to describe it as being math, the sort of math you can pick up on the street. You can play if you understand poker, you know enough math, but it's not wasted. When you're designing games, just like when you're writing books, there's really nothing wasted. If it interests you, it can feed your creations. If what you like is economics, that's going to help your writing. It's going to help your game design. If you like music, it's the same thing. And so whatever is your passion will find a place in your games.
Speaking of anagrams, that's funny that you should bring that up for Feldigriff, because Sam, aka Ristic Studies, asks, and I am going to butcher this name. There is a character that was named on an early alpha magic card on Stone Gargoyle, who later got her own legendary creature designed because it was such a obsessed character in Magic, and it is Asmaran O'Muradicadiscenticular Dakar. Does this ring any bells, Richard?
It absolutely does.
Okay. Sam wants to know if
that.
That's an anagram desperately. He has been trying to crack this for years, if that is an anagram.
And the answer is I don't know. I did maybe 20% of the original flavor text. And of course, the further you go down Magic's history, the less I contributed along those lines. And that was something contributed by somebody else. If he wanted to know, the person I would ask would be Dave Howell. I am not sure whether he would have been the writer, but he would have known. And he was involved in the early days of Magic. I remember that because I just loved the fact that name was so long. And I always responded more to the flavor text that had a sense of humor than the ones that were trying to play it straight serious. And that's sort of in that perfect area where you can interpret it seriously, but it's just funny seeing this mega name.
Yes. And she has now got her own official legendary creature because the player base loved the character or just the idea of someone with that kind of a name, and going in line with the fact that she authored a cookbook. Her character is indeed a cook. So maybe for a future commander deck of yours. You mentioned also Feldigriff, which is great because our next question comes from Feldigriff lover Rachel Weeks. And she asks, in Magic, as in any game, some matches with other players are better than others. What do you think makes for a truly great game?
Games is such a large umbrella. It's easy to over prune when you begin defining what makes something good or great. The things on the top of my list, a playful frame of mind between players where they feel like they can do things that are unexpected and surprise everyone else, and that the game system is such that those surprising things have surprising consequences, not necessarily a roll of a die surprising, but, oh, I could have anticipated that, but I didn't. For me, that often makes the best environment. People look for different things. Some people are looking to zone out and have a conversation. Other people are not looking to playing seriously. They're looking to push the button and see crazy crap happen. And other people are trying to explore new things, and other people are trying to hone down and get the old things that they understood perfect. It's a big umbrella, and there's a lot of things that go into it.
True. Ben Wheeler wants to know, in Alpha, Plague Rats was a very popular card encouraging players to collect and play as many copies as they could get their hands on. In modern Magic, the most popular style of play, Commander, is a singleton format, limiting players to only one copy of each card. And so he asks, in the early years of the game, aside from rarity, was there ever a thought of a dedicated singleton mechanic?
Well, so it is one of the things that's marvelous about Magic is that how flexible it is. And so very, very early on, people were playing, they called it, I don't know if they still call it this, Highlander format, which was named with the extremely nerdy idea that there can only be one. That was not something that I thought of, but it's one of the many, many things which players came up with that I played around with and did enjoy. In general, my philosophy was that I didn't like to restrict players in that way. There is more variety when you allow people to get multiples of cards, but that does also push back to the idea that if everybody's going to play with lots of repeats, that decreases the variety. So you got this balance between variety and character. And so a deck with 4 of each type of card will have a lot of character, but less variety in how it plays. And with one-ofs, you'll have more variety in play, but a less coherent character. With Plague Rats, I'm not particularly heartbroken once that we even moved into the limitation of playing only 4 of a particular card, I'm not shattered that Plague Rats didn't have a place anymore. That's fine. That's not the same as the Chaos Orbs and the Shaherazads of the world in that they make sense, but I think for the overall good of the construction environment, they didn't have a place anymore.
Finally, my friend George asks, how much are you aware of the Magic as Richard Garfield intended meme? And is there something about Magic that you think is actually better now than your original intention for it?
I am aware of the Magic as Richard intended it meme. I've seen it applied to many amusing things. If I had to choose something which was as I intended, it would be a tie between playing with a playful attitude and taking ownership of your environment. That is, deciding your own deck construction, draft rules, formats. Those are things that I sort of intended that do get reflected. The playful gets reflected a lot. The taking control of your environment a fair amount, as is shown by the rise of formats like Commander. I love serious play. The only trepidation I have on it is I don't like it when that poisons casual and explorative play. But that is something which is better certainly than when I made it, and only vaguely anticipated was how seriously people could analyze what you can do with a Magic deck. People have just explored that territory with enthusiasm and found so many interesting discoveries, and that's been very gratifying to me as a designer. Back when I made Magic, and still, I read for fun books on chess strategy, even though I didn't really play chess. I read books on Go. I read books on bridge, how to play dots and boxes. I love game analysis and serious thought on how to play the games. And so that was like a dream come true when people started to actually do that to Magic. And so if I had to pick one thing which is better today, the state of the science behind Magic. And as long as it doesn't ruin the experience for casual players who just want to have fun, that's great.
Well, I'd love to talk about your new game, Vanguard Exiles. Before I get into specific questions about that, I gotta just ask, what board games are in your rotation right now? What are you playing right now?
I have a pair of 7-year-old twins, and they're at a very exciting stage of game development, game understanding. We just played Zombie Kids, a very light legacy style game. I just taught them Small World. They really enjoyed that. And then we're playing a lot of Magical Athlete because I'm working on a new version of Magical Athlete. It's a lot of fun. If you can find an old copy, I would recommend it. And if you can't, within the year, probably there'll be a new copy.
What are some games that people already play and love that would apply to Vanguard Exiles? As in, if you already like this game, you're probably really going to like Vanguard.
Well, Vanguard Exiles is an auto battler, an interesting genre for me. Since the early days of computer games, I've been interested in the space of computer games that was between simulation style games, like a first-person shooter or a real-time strategy game, and a board game like Scrabble. The gulf between these experiences is so large that I knew that there must be some really cool games in between. And auto battlers became immediately really interesting to me because they felt like paper games. I was able to think about my move, understand the consequences of the move, have time to make my moves, and then sit back. The computer was able to resolve those moves for me, and I'd see how they work out. So I think for people who like board games but aren't sure about computer games, auto battlers is a great genre. The auto battlers that it's closest to, I would say, would be something like Hearthstone Battlegrounds. The basics of the auto battler are you are building an army and then you're competing the army against somebody else, but the resolution of what's going on is random. Random using rules that you understand. And so you're trying to choose units in your army that work well together. And in the case of Vanguard Exiles, one of the things that makes it particularly interesting is how you set up your army makes a big difference. So you get like a random dungeon and you put your units in there, and the different rooms of the dungeons have different rewards. Some give you gold, some give you victory points. And then when you hit go, your guys run around the dungeon, they capture rooms, they have battles, then you rinse and repeat, buy some new guys, deploy again, the dungeon grows.
Very cool, very cool. What are some lessons from previous titles in terms of successes and failures that you have applied to Vanguard Exiles?
Vanguard Exiles is exploring this idea that I began exploring with Keyforge, in that each player that plays has their own unique deck. I like asymmetric games. I like games where you're bringing different tools than me. With Keyforge, each person has their own deck, and so nobody can tell you what deck to play because they're all different. And so the science of play, because as we've already established, I'm a big fan of the science of games too, and the analysis of games. But the scientists, the analysts, they cannot tell you what to play. They have to give you more general heuristic advice, which leaves a lot more room for you actually to play. And so that's what we're using in Vanguard Exiles. Everybody brings their own deck, and you learn as you play what makes the deck you are playing strong. One of the main things that I am bringing from my past experience to Vanguard Exiles is this idea of I want this differentiated position, but I don't want it to be such that people can tell you how you have to engage with it.
Well, Richard, in lieu of a final question for you to tell me something, I'm wondering if I could close by just saying something to you when I have this opportunity. And that's thank you. Magic the Gathering has been a part of my life for my whole life, and I'm not the only person who's been touched by it. You can find so many testimonies to people who say, Magic saved my life, and Magic helped me meet my friends, my life partner. You've changed the world for the better, and I just really would like to thank you for that, because you've left a really positive dent in the universe for so many of us. And so I just want to close by saying thank you for everything you've given to us. I'm getting choked up, but thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, that's very, very sweet. I feel blessed to have been able to share the games I've made with people, and that they've been so loved. People who in the audience who are so inclined, I would love to have them check out Vanguard Exiles, because I think it's at a very early stage, and I would just love to have some of these folk help me explore this new world, because I think that there's something new going on with it, and I don't know. It's exploring games is what I love to do, and I think the people who are into Magic have shown that they love that as well, and so thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about Magic and games and Vanguard.
Absolutely, and we will of course have all applicable links in this video's description, and I encourage everyone to check out Vanguard Exiles, as well as every game, any game made by Richard Garfield, including of course Magic the Gathering as well. Thank you so much, Richard.
Oh, my pleasure.